Guitarists love to solo using the pentatonic scale, and they'll often stick to only using this scale. So why is that? Welcome to Dave's Guitar Club. Love music, learn music, make music. I, like most people, started soloing by playing the pentatonic boxes, and when I learned the full scales, I felt like I had lost some of the musicality that I had when I just played pentatonic. We need to start by having a quick look at the major scale. The major scale is one of the most common musical scales, especially in Western music. It has 7 notes and then repeats again an octave higher. There's a formula for working out the major scale, which is a series of tones and semitones that gives you the notes that are within that scale. The formula is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Now in this video we're going to use the key of G, so starting on the G note, we then follow the formula and this gives us the notes of the G major scale, which are G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Now we know the notes in the key, putting these notes together will give us a selection of chords that only use these notes. So the chords in this key are G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished, and then back to G major, an octave higher. So the major scale is a very useful thing to know about for making chords, chord progressions and understanding keys. But now let's have a look at using this scale for soloing and how it relates to the familiar pentatonic scale that we guitar players are such big fans of. I will now play using this major scale over a backing track. All of these backing tracks and scale charts and much more are available from my Patreon page by visiting the link in the description box below. You might notice that all of these notes work and sound good, but there are 2 notes that can sound unsettled and imply tension over these chords. These notes are the C note and the F sharp note. The C note is the 4th note in the scale, which we call a perfect 4th interval, and the F sharp note is the 7th note in the scale, which we call a major 7th interval. So an interesting thing that I would like to make note of here is that these notes are the 2 half steps or semitones found in the major scale. So these 4th and 7th intervals create tension as they are just a semitone away from a stronger resolution point within the scale. So when you land on the 4th, it feels like it wants to pull you back to the 3rd. When you land on the 7th, it feels like it wants to push up and go up to that root note. So because of this, they can be used as passing notes very well, but can sound a bit off when you rest on them. Of course, you can use these intervals, and we're going to come on to that in a bit more detail later, but they have to be used carefully. If you play these notes in the wrong places and you keep landing on these notes in the wrong places, it can sound like you don't really know what you're doing. If we take this major scale and we remove the perfect 4th and we remove the major 7th intervals, we're going to be left with the notes G, A, B, D, E, and then we just go back to the octave G. So these 5 notes make up the G major pentatonic scale. Now I think this kind of makes sense as the word penta means 5 and we now have a 5-note scale. So basically all we have done is take the major scale and remove those notes that we need to be careful with. I can now use this scale over any of the chords in the key, and each note should sound good all the way through. Now obviously there will always be exceptions to this, but this will work the majority of the time. So by limiting the chances of hitting the wrong notes, we reduce the risk of playing errors when we're soloing. The pentatonic scale is where most guitar players start playing lead guitar, by learning pentatonic licks. There are lots of ways that you can look at scales, and at the end of the day, soloing is a creative process. I personally think it's down to you as a musician to make and to play the music that you hear in your head. If you feel like you're getting stuck in the pentatonic boxes, then I do have something that I want you to try that kind of combines these scales to help you to make music and to provide you with an approach to soloing that you might not have thought of before. Let's use the pentatonic scale as our starting point. Use the licks that you know. We learn licks using this scale because they sound good, so let's use them. But what I want you to try now is to think about where you start or finish your pentatonic licks and start incorporating the notes that we've removed, but using them in the right places. Play over the backing track and listen to the chord progression. Play using the pentatonic scale, so use the licks you know and improvise, and make sure that you are following and listening to the chord progression whilst you're playing. When the C chord comes around, I want you to start your pentatonic lick or end your pentatonic lick by playing that C note from the full major scale. Still play the pentatonic licks the same, but just use that note as a resolution or as a starting off point, and you'll be amazed at how this can transform your playing. If you get lost and don't know what chord you're on, just go back to playing the familiar pentatonic scale and the licks that you already know, because we know that these work. Next, I want you to think in the same way, but over a D major chord. So when the D major comes around, I want you to highlight the F sharp note within your pentatonic licks. And the reason being is the D major chord contains the F sharp note as the major third. So it should sound really good to use the F sharp note within your pentatonic licks. So let's try adding both of those things together with a longer chord progression that uses both the C chord and the D chord too. So the progression will be G major, E minor, C major, and D major as well. And like I say, the backing tracks are available on the Patreon page. When you do land on these notes in the right places, you're going to find that your playing becomes automatically more melodic. So the thing to really focus on here is to work on following the chords in the chord progression. You will get lost at first, but you will get better at this the more you do it and the more you practice. Obviously, there are more chords within the key that utilise these notes. These are just some examples to get you started, really. For example, you could use a C note over an A minor chord, or an F sharp note over a B minor chord. These are going to sound great. There's extended chords, so things like major sevens, minor sevens, that kind of thing. So an F sharp used over a G major 7 will sound great. A C over a D7 chord is also going to sound great. Basically, you see, what we've covered so far is just scratching the surface. We're now getting into the topic of playing over the chord changes, which basically just means highlighting notes from the chords as they're being played. And what we've looked at today is a great place to get you started with this. Playing the changes is the key to playing melodically, and there is no greater feeling than hitting the right note in the right place. So my advice to take away from this lesson is trying to listen to the chord progression as you're playing. All of the backing tracks that have been used in this lesson and much more is available from my Patreon page. Just follow the link below. And please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.